Welcome back to our last signpost, the memory moment. Again, take a minute, pause your video, fill in the blanks on your notes sheets with the words that are underlined, and then press play when you are ready to go. Okay, so a memory moment is when our main character or protagonist remembers something that happened to them previously or something they were told about. They have a recollection. And this memory or this recollection interrupts the action or the plot that's going on in the story that we're reading. So the characters in engaging with other characters, or the characters doing something, and then that gets interrupted by the memory. Then we get the whole memory, and when the memory's done, we pick back up with the action or the interaction that the character was doing before the memory. Okay, so let's take a look at these clues. Pause your video, fill in your blanks. When you're ready to go, press play. So one of the ways that we can tell that we have found a memory moment signpost is that the action that's going on, or the plot element that we're seeing, stops all of a sudden, and we're in another place and time because our character's remembering something else. And then we have that memory, and that memory usually goes on for at least a paragraph because the character walks us through that whole memory. Then when that memory's done, we go back to the plot that we were in the middle of before the memory. Okay? And so the question that we need to ask, the anchor question, is why might this memory be important? Right? The author wouldn't throw a memory into our story and interrupt the plot of our story if it wasn't important. So there's something about that memory that's either going to help us understand the character better, that might impact a decision that the character makes and so have an effect on the plot, that might help the character come to a realization. So we might start to see evidence of the theme developing. Okay. So one of the things that we might think about, I'm going to switch gears from Harry Potter to the Hunger Games, is in the second book of the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Katniss and Peeta won at the end of the first book, and now in the second book, they have to go on a tour of all of the districts. So as the victors, they have to visit every single district where all of the other competitors were from. And they give a speech, and they might receive gifts from people in the district, but generally it's an uncomfortable experience because all of those other victors, sorry, not victors, all of the other competitors from those districts are dead. That's how Peeta and Katniss won. So all of the people in the districts are sad, and they're missing the people who came from their districts. So Katniss and Peeta go on this tour, and they end up in the district where Rue and Thresh are from. And Katniss can't do anything but focus on the faces of the family members of Rue and Thresh. And she knows she should say something. She knows she should thank Rue and Thresh for their alliance and their allegiance, and that she should try to comfort the people in their district. But she lets Peeta talk. So he's giving his speech, and he's offering them part of his winnings, and he's thanking Rue and Thresh. And Katniss is just standing there, and she's just kind of staring at the people. And then we stop, and she remembers her time in the arena with Rue. And she remembers Rue helping her. And she walks us through this memory. She remembers Rue helping her. She remembers the plan that they came up with to get rid of the career's supplies. She remembers trying to find Rue when they finished getting rid of their supplies. and she remembers Rue being killed. And then she remembers burying Rue and putting not burying her, but honoring her. So she can't bury Rue because she's not allowed, but she puts flowers all around Rue, and she sings a song to her before the Capitol comes in and takes her body away. And Katniss goes through this whole memory. And then we come back to Katniss and Peeta in their district, and Peeta finishing up his speech. And then that memory that Katniss had makes her realize that she can't stay silent. She has to say something. She has to do something. Okay? So the memory of her time with Rue in the arena interrupts the speech that Peeta's giving and Katniss standing on the stage looking out at all the people. It interrupts that. We get the whole memory, and then we're back there with Peeta finishing up his speech and Katniss seeing them. And that memory impacts Katniss. We ask, why is it important? And then we realize it's important because she decides that she can't stay quiet. She has to say something. She has to thank Rue and Thresh's family for Rue and Thresh. And that moment of saying thank you leads to all these other conflicts and all these other changes in the plot. So it's one very small memory moment, but it impacts everything that comes after. Let's take a look at this memory moment practice together. This is another excerpt from Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. I sat on the edge of a gorge in the Badlands, looking back at Gram and Gramps and the pregnant woman on the blanket. I pretended that it was my mother sitting there, and she would still have the baby, and everything would be the way it was supposed to be. And then I tried to imagine my mother sitting here on her trip out to Lewiston, Idaho. Did all the people on the bus get out and walk around with her, or did she sit by herself like I was doing? Did she sit here in this spot, and did she see that pink spire? Was she thinking about me? I picked up a flat stone and sailed it across the gorge where it hit the far wall and plummeted down, down, careening off the jagged outcroppings. My mother once told me the Blackfoot story of Napi, the old man who created men and women. To decide if these new people should live forever or die, Napi selected a stone. If the stone floats, he said, you will live forever. If it sinks, you will die. Napi dropped the stone into the water. It sank. People died. Why did Napi use a stone, I asked. Why not a leaf? My mother shrugged. If you had been there, you could have made the rock float, she said. She was referring to my habit of skipping stones across the water. I picked up another rock, and it sailed across the gorge, and this one, too, hit the opposite wall and fell down and down and down. It was not a river. It was a hole. What did I expect? Okay, pause the video. Take a few minutes to read through the excerpt again if you need to, and try to identify where our memory moment signpost happens. When you're ready, press play. Okay, if you thought our memory moment started with my mother once told me the Blackfoot story of the Napi and went all the way down to she was referring to my habit of skipping stones across the water, then you found our memory moment. Before that paragraph that starts with my mother once told me the Blackfoot story, we're with Sal and her grandparents, and we're in that action. Then we stop, we get the story that her mother told her, we get the question that she asked her mom, and we get her mom's response. So that is the memory of her mother telling her that story and the interaction around that story. Then we go back to the part of the plot that we were in. I picked up another rock and sailed it across the gorge. That's what she was doing before she remembered the story from her mother. Jot down any questions that you have, and we'll answer them in class.